Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw this week, Paul George, of all people, got suspended for 25 games for the use of improper medication. That's what they're calling it.
We're talking about a massive penalty here. 25 games on the shelf and nearly $12 million down the drain. The league claims he breached their anti-drug protocols, while George insists it was just medication for his mental health. But then, the internet dug up some old tapes. Naturally, social media went absolutely nuclear, and we finally pieced together what actually went down. This is the story of Prescription P and the suspension that shook the entire NBA. It all started on January 31st, 2026, when the NBA dropped a press release that hit the basketball world like a meteor, detonating across every timeline and feed in a matter of hours. The Philadelphia 76ers forward was officially barred from the court for 25 games without pay. The financial hit? Absolutely brutal. Roughly $11.9 million in salary evaporated in a heartbeat over what George described as a simple medication mix-up. This is a 9-time All-Star we're talking about, a guy who spent 15 years building a reputation as an elite two-way killer with 4 all-defensive nods. Now, he's looking at missing the bulk of the 2025-26 regular season, leaving Philly's playoff dreams hanging by a literal thread. And that is a nightmare scenario for a franchise that committed $212 million to George just 18 months prior. The update hit Philly like a wrecking ball. It broke through ESPN's Shams Charania, who noted that George blamed the failed test on a prescription he was taking to manage a personal mental health matter. George immediately put out a statement owning the mistake. He apologized to the front office, the locker room, and the fan base, promising to use the time off to get his mind and body right for a strong comeback. Following standard procedure, the NBA kept the specific substance under wraps, though insiders confirmed this wasn't about steroids or performance enhancers. Of course, that detail didn't stop the internet from doing what it does best, spinning wild theories and roasting the man into oblivion before he could even step up to a microphone. The nicknames started flying almost instantly. You had Prescription P, Drug P, and PED, George trending on X and TikTok within hours. Even with the reports clarifying that he wasn't juicing, the memes were ruthless. The jokes wrote themselves, and the court of public opinion had already banged the gavel guilty long before the actual facts made the rounds. Everyone was trying to land the viral tweet of the day. Parody accounts swapped their avatars to mock him, while fantasy owners went into a full-blown panic trying to salvage their lineups. But underneath the chaos, one question remained, the one every analyst, fan, and conspiracy theorist was dying to know. What exactly was in Paul George's system? The joint anti-drug program between the NBA and the Players Association has a banned substance list that's a lot longer and more complex than your average fan realizes. The policy explicitly outlaws benzodiazepines like alprazolam, Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, and Librium. These are standard treatments for anxiety, but in the league's eyes, they fall squarely under drugs of abuse. Then you've got stimulants like Adderall. It's one of the most common ADHD meds in the country, but in the NBA, you can't just take it because your doctor said so. You need a therapeutic use exemption, which basically means getting the league's doctors to sign off on it first. The list goes even deeper, banning heavy hitters like ketamine, LSD, cocaine, and synthetic cathinones. It's a massive dragnet designed to catch everything from recreational party drugs to unapproved prescriptions. As one analyst noted, the problem likely wasn't the drug itself, but the chain of custody, how he got it, and why the team's training staff was left in the dark.
It says Paul George's 25-game suspension highlighted that taking medication for a mental health issue that is not approved or is misused, even if prescribed by a personal doctor rather than a team doctor, can lead to significant penalties. So I'm wondering if maybe it was something that he didn't want the team to find out about. And if, in fact, it is mental health related, I mean, I don't know if that's everyone's business. I mean, maybe it is, I guess, because you're part of the team. They invest a lot of money in you. Maybe it's in their best interest to know.
That brings up a tough conversation about where the line is drawn between an athlete's privacy and their employer's rights, a stigma the NBA has only recently started to address seriously. Reports indicate the suspension came down because the script came from a personal doctor, not a team-approved physician. That is a massive distinction in the league's rulebook. It's still up in the air whether George hid the treatment because he was scared of the stigma around mental health meds, or if he just got lost in the league's complicated maze of therapeutic exemption paperwork. But the outcome is undeniable. 25 games out, $12 million lost, and his private health battles broadcasted across the entire sports media landscape for everyone to dissect. The timing of it all definitely raised some eyebrows around the league, too. One popular theory suggests George triggered a random drug test after dropping 32 points on the Bucks on January 27th, just 4 days before the news broke. It's speculation, sure, but you can see why people connected the dots. He'd been cruising along with 16 points a game, so suddenly exploding for 32 against a top-tier team is exactly the kind of outlier performance that wakes up the testing algorithms. But others pointed to a different catalyst, a viral moment that happened days before the suspension, which many fans are now convinced was the real reason he got flagged.
When I first saw this story break, a couple days before, I had reposted this video. Paul George was in a layup line doing 360 dunks with ease. Now listen, at his age, with the amount of injuries he's had, seeing that, I knew he was going to get tested. I said it as soon as I saw the fucking video. He should never have done that shit in the layup line. Go watch this video.
Remember, this is a 35-year-old veteran whose resume is defined as much by his smooth game as it is by that horrific leg injury in Vegas back in 2014. Watching him bounce around with Tyrese Maxey, throwing down 360s like he was 22 again, it was honestly a little jarring to watch. We are talking about a guy who has been under the knife multiple times and fought through chronic shoulder issues in LA. He walked into the 2025-2026 season at an age when most forwards are either warming the bench or out of the league entirely. That warm-up routine was basically a billboard begging for a drug test, and he got one. The result? A suspension that cost him 8 figures and derailed his season. If the suspension was the earthquake, the reaction on social media was the tsunami that followed. That's where the memes and one specific clip came into play. Footage from February 2025 resurfaced at the worst possible moment. It shows George joking with Joel Embiid about injuries, where he casually drops the line, "Drugs help me." In context, it was just locker room banter. 2 beat-up stars laughing about the grind of the season and the toll it takes on their bodies. It was clearly a veteran making a dark joke about the anti-inflammatories and pain management routines every older athlete lives by just to stay on the floor. But you drop that clip right after a 25-game suspension? It becomes exactly what the internet craves, a perfect weapon for mass humiliation. The video spread like wildfire across X, TikTok, and Instagram, racking up millions of views in less than 48 hours. The comment sections were a disaster zone, with everyone recycling the same jokes and trying to out-savage each other. People took a screenshot of the exact moment he said it and turned it into the meme template of the week, dominating basketball discourse for days. That video spread like wildfire, retweeted, stitched, quoted, and plastered across the feed of every sports aggregator with a pulse and a signal. Creators who couldn't name 3 teams suddenly morphed into armchair pharmacists analyzing Paul George's medical history. It was a textbook viral moment. Massive reach, zero accuracy. Everyone conveniently ignored the backdrop. George wasn't copping to doing hard drugs or confessing to breaking league rules. He wasn't giving a tour of his stash. He was cracking the kind of grim joke you expect from a 34-year-old athlete whose knees have survived 15 brutal years in the league. He was riffing on the unglamorous truth. Staying on the court at his age takes a serious, legally prescribed medical routine just to function. He was talking about standard issue, doctor-approved treatments that half the league runs on. But let's be honest, that headline doesn't sell. Social media is where nuance goes to die. Algorithms don't push content that says, "Hey, hang on, it's actually pretty boring and complicated." That brings us to the elephant in the room, the viral claim about new footage of George partying with teammates which needs to be shut down right now. Let me be crystal clear. That video is a phantom. No reputable journalist or outlet has seen, verified, or published footage of Paul George doing recreational drugs with other players. It's fiction. You can scour ESPN, The Athletic, Yahoo, Twitter, and the darkest depths of TikTok, and you will come up empty. The only thing out there is that old drugs help me soundbite. People took old clips, stripped away the context, and repackaged them with misleading captions. Then they fed it all to an algorithm built from the ground up to reward outrage and shock rather than facts or fairness. The misinformation machine worked perfectly, every gear turning exactly as intended. The actual suspension gave the lie a foothold in reality, while that recycled video provided the visuals, however deceptive. Memes and nicknames turned a serious career setback into bite-sized content, and the lack of official specifics left a void that internet rumors were happy to fill. In just a few days, the average fan scrolling their phone bought into a story that had almost nothing to do with what actually happened. They pictured George getting wasted on camera with the squad, a movie scene that simply never took place. Charles Barkley threw gas on the fire when he went on Times Inside the NBA Times and called George's explanation for the meds fishy. openly questioning the whole story in front of a national audience. When Chuck speaks, people listen. His blunt doubts carry serious weight in basketball culture. He's a titan of sports media, so when he questions the official narrative, millions of viewers figure they should too. That soundbite rippled through the ecosystem, fueling debates in group chats and comment sections for weeks. Everyone jumped in. Michael Irvin was cracking jokes, drawing parallels to his own famous run-ins with recreational substances. By then, the truth was gone. The conversation ran purely on vibes, comedy, and entertainment.
Now, I also saw in a lot of the comments, people were saying, oh, it's probably just weed. Weed isn't banned anymore in the NBA. So it's not that. But after seeing him do all them dunks and shit in the layup line, I was thinking maybe him and LeBron got the same doctor. I'm kidding. Kind of. Kidding.
That crack about LeBron might have been a joke, but it was laced with real suspicion. It tapped into a very large audience and touched on one of the quietest, most persistent rumors in pro sports. There is this lingering idea that when elite vets play at a superhuman level deep into their 30s, they must be doing something more than just eating right and sleeping in hyperbaric chambers. That shadow has trailed guys like LeBron James, Tom Brady, and Cristiano Ronaldo for years. It is the type of suspicion you can never prove or disprove, which is exactly why it never goes away. George getting suspended gave those whispers a concrete data point, a real violation by a veteran looking surprisingly athletic, even though, officially, the ban had nothing to do with performance enhancers. The money involved added a whole other layer of drama to a story that was already too complex for a single news cycle to handle responsibly. Back in July 2024, George inked a massive 4-year, $212 million deal with Philly. That contract made him one of the highest paid guys in the league and was supposed to be the move that blew the Sixers championship window wide open.
Yeah, I mean, it does suck because 25 games, I read that he's like essentially giving up $11 million. I just think about that. You took some medication for, I guess, your mood, right? Just to feel better, I imagine. And it cost you $11 million.
That is a staggering financial hit, more than most Americans will earn in 5 lifetimes combined. It really highlights how severe the league's anti-drug policy is and how absolutely rigid they are about enforcing it. The NBA operates on strict liability for drug testing. They do not care about intent, medical reasons, or your personal situation. If a banned substance shows up in your system and you didn't file the right paperwork, you are guilty. Period. George isn't the first guy to get hammered by this rule, and he won't be the last. His case fits perfectly into a growing pattern of 25-game suspensions. It reveals just how many players get tripped up by this policy, whether it is deliberate cheating or just tragic administrative negligence. George is not an isolated incident. He is just the latest name on a long list of guys who face the exact same penalty for very similar mistakes. Back in February 2025, Bobby Portis caught a 25-game suspension for tramadol, an opioid that's a no-go for both the NBA and WADA. Portis and his agent claimed it was a simple mix-up, confusing tramadol with Toradol. Toradol is the legal stuff the anti-inflammatory shot players take constantly to numb the pain of the grind. The story was that he grabbed a pill from an assistant's bottle by mistake. Didn't matter. The policy doesn't do oops. Then look at Tristan Thompson in January 2024. Same 25-game hit, but for ibutamoren and SARM LGD 4033. Those are straight-up performance enhancers. No gray area there, and no accidental ingestion excuse either. Thompson just took the L, served his time without appealing, and said he used the break to get back in shape. Rewind to November 2019, and you've got John Collins suspended 25 games for a growth hormone releaser. Collins issued the standard apology to the team and fans. He talked about appealing, but the suspension stuck regardless. Back in that same October, Phoenix Suns big man DeAndre Ayton, the top overall pick from the 2018 draft, got hit with that exact 25-game ban. He popped for a diuretic, which is basically a substance often used as a masking agent to hide other banned compounds floating around in a player's system. When you look at the trend across these situations, it exposes a critical and honestly kind of uncomfortable truth about the NBA's drug policy. That 25-game suspension is the automatic penalty for a first strike, and it comes down just as hard whether you accidentally took a tainted painkiller, deliberately used a PED, or just took mental health meds without getting the league's green light first. At the first offense level, the rules don't distinguish between a simple mistake and actual intent to cheat. It's a system designed to prioritize fear and competitive integrity over fairness to the individual. Take Wilson Chandler, for example. He got suspended 25 games in August 2019 for testing positive for ipamorelin, a growth hormone peptide he claimed was for injury rehab, before signing with the Brooklyn Nets. It cost him about $650,000 in salary, teaching him that same brutal lesson. The NBA's testing machine doesn't care times why times the stuff is in your body. It only cares that it's there. Repeat offenders and serious violations face way harsher consequences, which serves as a reminder that 25 games is actually the merciful end of the spectrum in the league's eyes. Toronto Raptors guard Jalen Harris got kicked out of the league entirely in July 2021 for violating the drug policy, a permanent ban that requires a formal reinstatement process with the league's review board just to get back in. If you look back at the 80s through the early 2000s, you'll see multi-year suspensions and lifetime bans were pretty standard for repeat cocaine-related issues. The most famous examples are Michel Ray Richardson's permanent ban in 1986 and Roy Tarpley's career-ending string of suspensions. The modern NBA has mostly shifted toward rehab and compassion for first-timers. Still, the hit to your wallet and the team's record, even for a first offense, is severe enough to completely derail a player's season, their reputation, and their bank account. For George specifically, the path to a comeback has a strict timeline, and it carries massive weight for both his own career arc and Philly's title hopes. The suspension kicked in right away with the 76ers game against the New Orleans Pelicans on January 31st, 2026, meaning George isn't eligible to return until March 25th, 2026, when Philly hosts the Chicago Bulls. By then, the Sixers will have just 10 regular season games left on the schedule. That is a barely there window for George to shake off the rust from a 2-month layoff, get back in sync with teammates who've spent 25 games building chemistry without him, and help push Philly into a playoff spot they've been fighting tooth and nail to keep. As of February 7th, 2026, there hasn't been a word about appeals or reductions, so expect George to sit out every single one of those 25 games. The Philadelphia organization has handled this with a measured, diplomatic, and supportive tone, suggesting the franchise sees this as just a bump in the road rather than a broken relationship. Sixers GM Daryl Morey publicly stood by George, saying he was disappointed but totally confident in his return, emphasizing that George is still a key piece of that untouchable core, next to Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Head coach Nick Nurse confirmed George is allowed in the practice facility during his suspension, which means he'll stay physically and mentally locked in with the team's prep, even if he can't suit up on game nights. Early results without him have been cautiously positive. Philly went 3-1 in the first 4 games of the ban, leaning on Kelly Oubre Jr., stepping up and Maxey continuing to evolve as the main scorer and playmaker. Financially, there was actually a cynical silver lining for the front office. George's forfeited salary created a luxury tax credit of about $5.8 million. That represents half his lost wages, which helped Philadelphia get closer to the tax apron and likely played a role in the team's quiet, conservative moves at the February 5th trade deadline. The basketball cost, though, is way harder to measure and much more dangerous for their playoff life. Before this, George was putting up 16 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 3.7 assists across 27 games, while being looked at as the team's best, most versatile wing defender, the kind of guy whose impact goes way beyond the box score. Analysts figure the Sixers still have about 73 to 74% playoff odds without George, likely heading for the play-in tournament if they can't climb the standings while he's out. But the bigger picture here is about more than just stats, playoff percentages, and luxury tax math. George's situation has fired up a debate that the NBA and its players have been wrestling with for years. It's about the clash between mental health treatment, pro sports, and a drug testing system built to catch cheaters and recreational users that is now snagging players just trying to get legitimate medical care for conditions that still carry a heavy stigma. The NBA's policy runs on strict liability, a setup that protects the league's integrity, but creates real tension when applied to players dealing with the deeply personal, often scary process of getting mental health help. The fact that George was willing to publicly link his violation to mental health care was actually a pretty brave moment of vulnerability for a high-profile athlete. And the fact that this vulnerability got met with memes, mockery, and ridicule instead of empathy says a lot about where the public conversation on mental health in sports really is versus where we like to pretend it is. As for that supposed leaked footage, the internet was obsessing over the incriminating video of Paul George allegedly doing drugs with other players. It was never real. It was a ghost story born from the chaos of the suspension news. It was just a resurfaced joke clip taken completely out of context by meme accounts and a digital world that stopped caring about the truth long before Paul George's name even came up. The real story, a veteran player seeking help for a mental health issue the wrong way, messing up the league's paperwork, and paying a huge price for it, is compelling and human enough on its own. But understanding that requires patience and empathy, which are in short supply. Those are things the modern internet just doesn't value. Paul George is set to come back on March 25th, 2026, giving him exactly 10 games to prove he's still the player Philly paid $212 million for. We're talking about a 9-time All-Star, a 2019 MVP candidate who averaged 28 points and led the league in steals. We are talking about a two-way juggernaut who snagged 4 all-defensive honors and consistently delivers in the clutch. He has been the driving force for teams across the map from Indiana and Oklahoma City to Los Angeles and Philadelphia throughout a career stretching 15 years. By the time he returns, the internet will have moved on to the next outrage, the next misleading headline, or the next out-of-context clip that fits whatever narrative feels good in the moment. That's just the cycle. And Paul George, whether you call him Prescription P, Drug PG-13, or just a guy who used to throw down 360 windmills like gravity didn't exist, is just the latest player to get chewed up by the gears. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out the other videos on the screen.